Koutou katoa. No mai haere mai ki tēnei hui o te kaunihera o Rotorua. Welcome to our council meeting for the 22nd of February. Pleasure to have you here and pleasure to have members of our public joining us today as well. I'd also like to welcome anyone joining through live stream, and just a reminder to everyone to please make sure your phones are on silent or vibrate. We will have a short morning tea break around about 10:30, anywhere between 10:30 and 11, depending how we go. But to start off our meeting, I'd like to invite Councillor Kai Fong to open us up with a karakia.
Morena koutou, ki e nai tātou, tūtaua mai I runga, tūtaua mai I raro, tūtaua mai I roto, tūtaua mai I waho, kia tau ai te mauri tū, te mauri ora, ki te katoa, haumi e, hui e, tae ki e.
Thank you, Councillor Kai Fong. I call for any apologies. We do just have one this morning for Councillor Maxwell, who is attending the Matatini major event. May I have a mover and a seconder? Moved by Councillor Kai Fong, seconded by Councillor Waru. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Thank you. Any declarations of interest this morning? Yes, Councillor O'Brien.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through the Chair, I'd just like to declare that on item 6.4, my partner works for the principal law firm who I believe gave advice to Council, so I'd just like to put that out there. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll note that. Any urgent items not on the agenda this morning? Councillor O'Brien.
Thank you, Your Worship. I was just wondering if I could possibly raise for discussion the incidents around the Sir Howard Morrison Centre. The reasons for it not being on the agenda, obviously the event cancellation happened after the publication, and also I think just public interest given the amount of investment that Council has contributed. I don't think they'd expect us to be asking questions and for Council team to be offering explanations. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor O'Brien. I'll ask our Chief Executive to give us a brief update on where we're at.
Thank you, through the Chair. Look, I think to say that the team involved, those who were performing, as well as the general public, were extremely disappointed to, just before the performance, obviously have to abandon it. It was something that no one wanted to see. There was an immediate, the following day, there was a review to gain a technical understanding of what actually occurred, and I think where we are at the moment is that we can see what happened. We're not quite sure at the moment about the contributing factors as to why it happened. More importantly, what's been currently undertaken is a review of the systems, the operating procedures, the protocols to ensure that it actually can't happen again in the future. The issue or the challenge that we have, this is a brand new centre, a brand new system. It's exceedingly complex, it's state of the art, and so therefore I think everyone involved is really still learning how do you actually operate this in a way most effectively. We had some sound issues on the first performance that you might have actually perceived. Unfortunately, everyone was walked away from that and the technical team wanting to make it a perfect performance on the Friday. And so there were some changes made during the day to try and correct that. But unfortunately, what seemed to have happened over that process is some technical issues arose. So that's where we are at the moment. We're still working through to gain an understanding, not so much about what happened, but why it happened and what do we need to do to ensure it doesn't happen again in the future. Once all of that material is collected and we've got that full understanding, we'll certainly present that back to Council, so you've also got a full understanding of it as well.
Yeah, and we'll get to come to the next available either committee or council meeting as soon as that information's gathered. But thank you very much. And despite the unfortunate events on Friday, we did were able to continue on with a successful family day on the Saturday, which many people enjoyed. But thank you very much for raising that, Councillor O'Brien. Are there any other urgent items? Yes.
Sorry again, Your Worship. Can I ask, and I hope this meets the criteria. I understand in regards to our last meeting with the submissions policy from public statements made that there is apparently legal action being initiated against Council. Are you able to provide any update on that? Thank you.
Received anything? I'll ask the Chief Executive to update. It's my understanding we haven't received anything.
And that's, I can confirm that we're in receipt of a letter, which I think was copied to all councillors, potentially raising the issue of legal action. We've heard nothing further.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you. Any other items? There do appear to be none. So we'll move to the confirmation of minutes for the council meeting held on the 8th of February. May I please have a mover and a seconder that these are confirmed as a true and correct record, and that is on page 5 of your agenda. You have something to raise? Yeah, Councillor Kirioba.
Morena, through the chair. I had specifically requested at the last council meeting that my kōrero relating to Indigenous representation on any kaupapa involving climate change be recorded within the minutes, and this hasn't happened, and I'd like that rectified if possible. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll get staff to go back on the recording and make a note and make sure they're accurate. We might actually just get them to check that with you as well. So we'll make that a minor amendment to the minutes. Were there any other things to raise on the minutes? No? Okay. Moved by Councillor Waru, seconded by Councillor Kaifong. I'll just double check that all councillors are happy with it. Yes. Okay. And it's, yeah, subject to the minor amendment. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Thank you. We now move into our reports. We did have hearings on curbside organic waste collection in Rotorua, of which the original of the submissions to submitters signalled that they wish to present their comments in person to council. For whatever reason, they have chosen that they no longer wish to do so, so we won't be having any verbal presentations from the submitters this morning. So we will take that report and their submissions as read alongside the other submissions that have been received. So we will then move on to the next item, which is financial performance for the 6 months ended 31st of December. You are on page 18 of your agenda now. May I please have a mover and a seconder to receive this report, that the report financial performance for the 6 months ended 31st of December 2022 be received. Moved by Councillor O'Brien, seconded by Councillor Lee. All those in favour, please say aye. And I'd like to invite Thomas Colley and David Jensen to speak to a presentation this morning.
Thank you, Your Worship, and good morning, councillors. Provide you a update of the 6-month performance to the 31st of December, and we'll also be talking about the forecast for the end of the year and what council staff has done. And it's not in your report, but also touch on some of the financial implications post Cyclone Gabrielle and the impact on some of our infrastructure. So, performance to date, revenue is lagging behind budget by $16.4 million. Predominantly, the majority of that, $17 million, is tied to capital revenues that are linked to the progress of capital expenditure. In particular, there are 2 projects that are driving that. The first one, too sure why it keeps wanting to jump ahead, sorry. The first one is the museum, and obviously there's a report coming to you in the future with regards to the progress of the museum. And the second one is the government funding to support the aquatic centre. And as you know, the aquatic centre, sorry, Una will try and turn off whatever is causing this presentation to keep skipping ahead, my apologies. Operating revenues underneath that, we'll leave it like that, it's fine. Operating underneath that is actually tracking ahead of budget, although within that there are a number of activities such as parking revenues and revenues for our events and venues which are lagging behind budget. And overall combined they are a $625,000 ahead of budget. So therefore the combination of the capital revenues being $17 million down, tied to the timing of our capital works program and our other revenues being up, we are 16.4 million down on that line. The main pressure is occurring in our operating expenditure. So our internal costs, which are predominantly staffing, are under budget and are tracking under budget. That is tied to a number of vacancies, as we have talked in the past. The ability to recruit and retain staff in this difficult market continues. Our external costs, however, are well in excess of budget, and that is tied to, in some places, CPI adjustments to key contracts that were higher than anticipated, but also the inflationary environment, the demand for resources, which is leading to contract works in particular costing more than that were anticipated. In addition to that, we have had to respond to emergency housing around the resource consents. We're also working on Plan Change 9, which is focusing, obviously, freeing up, making it easier to develop and build houses. And also, we've had a number of weather events pre-Cyclone Gabrielle, and in particular in our roading area, we have experienced significant damage from slips in particular. Our capital works program is about 17 million down on budget at the moment. That is predominantly tied to the timing of some key projects like the museum. The aquatic centre is now well underway, and so we are making good progress on a lot of the others, but we do anticipate we won't complete the full program for this year, as a number of activities are either deferred, waiting further decisions from yourself, or the ability to deliver some of them just due to the pressures that are currently in the market. To support that $45 million spend to date on our capital works program, we have borrowed an additional $28 million, and that is in line with the projects that were planned to borrow against, and so that borrowing is tied directly against that. So to give you an example of what some of those projects look like, completing the lakefront, the starting of the aquatic centre. The big one is the upgrade to the wastewater treatment plant, which commenced late last year, and also finishing the Rotorua sewage scheme. So predominantly the debt is being drawn down to support those projects. Just go to the next slide, Izzy. To give you an understanding of, if we take out the capital revenues, I haven't included it on this graph, and I apologise, it's a little bit smaller now than was anticipated. I have removed them because the scale would be quite significant. It would be hard to read the others. So these are our operational revenues, the green line being the budget and the blue being the actual. The one that stands out the most is obviously building services, where we see revenues well in excess of budget. That is the $420,000 that the organisation build MHUD with regards to the resource consent for the emergency housing, in particular down Fenton Street. You'll see in other places, particularly towards the left, parking revenues are lagging behind budget. Planning and implementation is also slowing down a little bit. That is more resource consent and land use changes. The Energy Event Centre as well is just falling behind a little bit around revenues, and that's around the events space as that rebuilds and has been rebuilding over the last 12 to 18 months. And you'll see a lot of the others are either at or close to budget. The anomaly there as well, the other one that stands out is the finance area. So that loss of revenue is when the regional council decided to rate by themselves, and there was a portion of cost recovery that we had to them, and we're still working through the charging of that, of what's appropriate, and we hope to have that completed by the end of the financial year. But it's unlikely that we'll fully recover or meet budget in that area. The key, though, is that overall, we are tracking overall ahead of our budget and our operating space, but you'll see that there are some challenges in some areas that the organisation is working hard towards remedying. The next slide will focus on just showing what our operating expense looks like. The key really is the top two lines. That's where the bulk of our expenditure sits. The first one being contractors and agency. That's predominantly the line that covers the the service delivery of, say, looking after our roading network, looking after our wastewater, and looking after our green spaces. So these are activities that have contracts in place to service them. And you'll see there that expenditure is ahead of budget, and that's as a result of predominantly CPI clauses in key contracts where we've had escalation higher than anticipated because inflation was higher than that was forecast at the time of setting these budgets. But also we're finding that as the year has gone on, certain products and services have become more expensive due to more demand, i.e. therefore more inflationary pressure on those, and so things are costing a lot more to service. A good example will be the closure of the refinery in Whangarei, which has sent huge demand on products that were once produced in New Zealand now being imported, and bitumen is one of those. So no longer imported in New Zealand, made in New Zealand, and now having to be imported from overseas. Whereas all the other line items are fairly close to pressure where they are. So, and as you'll see there as well, salaries and staff, those internal costs we mentioned are behind budget, and that's a reflection of our vacancy rate in this difficult market to recruit. So on our next slide, just a bit of a summary of the operating pressures that we are facing. So emergency housing actually led to a lot of time and cost into the organisation. So overall, to date, the organisation has spent $1.1 million with regards to emergency housing, and in particular the resource consents that took place. We have billed MHUD 420,000. However, there is a residual of 680,000 that wasn't budgeted and planned that now sits within the organisation. Plan Change 9, again, is a response to the housing challenges that we faced. So again, a lot of this is a little bit unbudgeted with regards to the work that was needed to take place. And at the moment we are seeing about $200,000 of additional cost to progress that plan change to allow for more housing to take place in general, $200,000 more than was budgeted. The third one is inflation, and so that's across a whole range of aspects. Part of it is also in our staffing as the markets are more competitive. Sometimes you are having to meet that market. But the main pressure as a whole is around particularly our service contracts with those CPI escalation clauses that we talked about. And in particular, there's about 3 to 4 contracts that are probably contributing about $800,000 worth of pressure, and that $800,000 is CPI escalation that was more than what was budgeted. So fourthly, we've experienced significant weather events. So we had Cyclone Hale previously, which caused significant disruption to our roading network. And obviously now we've had Cyclone Gabrielle. But prior to Cyclone Gabrielle, there was about $400,000 worth of additional expenditure responding to urgent repairs, and particularly in the roading network, as well as up to $2 million of capital works that need to be done to fix damage. And part of that, there's still discussions ongoing with Waka Kotahi with regards to what level of subsidy will be provided. Now, obviously, that will have to take into account with the unfortunate events of last weekend and Cyclone Gabrielle and what it has done with the rest of the country. Just on the next slide. So the impacts of Cyclone Gabrielle, and we're still working through it, but these are the things that we know. So roading, likely $400,000 worth of expenditure being incurred and still incurring with regards to emergency repairs and slip clearing in the district. Our buildings came through relatively unscathed. However, the Energy Event Centre roof was damaged, so a piece of flashing on the south side came off, and as it rattled across the main roof and exited on the north side, it has punctured holes throughout the roof. Now, we're still working with how to repair that, and that's obviously going to be an insurance claim. The nursery was also hit, and all the greenhouses are now damaged. And so we are working with a provider on how to fix those, but obviously we are competing for resource, the same resource that is also doing greenhouses throughout New Zealand, and in particular in the Te Puke area that were also hit. Trees was another significant one. A lot of trees down in the district on public spaces, and while many of them have been taken care of, there are still a significant number to deal with, and it is anticipated around trees that have fallen on either roadways, reserves, and in particular around the Te Tukarangi and Whakarewarea, about $150,000 worth of additional costs. And lakeside structures. So there have been damage to jetties and walkways. We have lost a whole walkway, and so it's likely that repair that and reinstatement will be in the ballpark of $150,000. So obviously we were already under significant pressure, and at the time of the report in your packs, we weren't aware of the impacts of Cyclone Gabrielle, and so that has now compounded the challenges that we face. And so on the next slide, this is the year-end forecast prior to the costs that I just mentioned around Cyclone Gabrielle. So around in November, December, the organisation did look as part of its regular cycle around where we were projected to be with regards to the end-of-year financial position. And at that time, we were staring down a deficit of $5.6 million against budget. We went back into a cycle over Christmas and early December around pulling that back. And so we have done prioritisation of work programs. We've identified cost savings of about $2.7 million. And so that forecast has now been pulled back to just under 2.9 million plus the post-Cyclone Gabrielle costs. Where that is clustered is predominantly into a couple of areas. So community wellbeing, obviously there's the challenges around parking revenue, some of those revenue challenges that we talked about, but also responding to the community safety challenges of the district. In addition to that, around the district development, around Plan Change 9 and so forth. And then the third one is around CPI clauses. And so we have just clustered how that looks like against some of those activities. I'll just pause a second to let you look at that some more if you wish. And then on the next slide. So noting the pressures that we've talked about and noting the actions that the staff have undertaken and we will continue to undertake, at this point we are forecasting a position against budget of at least 2.9 million, now plus post-Gabrielle costs. The organisation will continue to review its work programs and look at savings to minimise that as much as possible, but it is unlikely that under the current methodology that will be brought back to budget, and that's just the reality of the pressures that we are facing. What we can do is look at reducing our levels of service to try and find savings and to help pull that back, and we are seeking guidance from yourself as to whether you wish for us to explore that. I will just note that that it's unlikely we would get that back to a overall on budget position by reducing levels of service, and that's just a reflection of some of the challenges that we are facing. In addition, we are seeing a change in moving from proactive maintenance to reactive maintenance as we are responding to obviously damage. And what that actually means is that resources are being deployed to repair things that are damaged versus doing planned renewal work in places. And so there is also, we are at a time whereby as resources are diverted more towards reactive maintenance, the savings in our renewal programs, because some of that is not being undertaken the cash from that can also be used to help offset the additional costs in that area. So with that, happy to have any questions and just seek guidance from yourselves as to which pathway you wish for us to take. So thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you very much, Thomas. Any questions? And we'll take questions first and then go into a round of discussion if needed. Councillor Kaifong.
Thank you, Chair. Thomas, thank you for the report. Given that we're now 3 months out effectively from the end of the financial year, and you've outlined some strategies to try and bring the budget back into line, what are the consequences, given that it's quite a tight timeline, of actually not being able to bring the budget back into the targets by that financial year end?
It will be difficult to bring it back, and I think as well when we talk about changing levels of service and pulling costs back, that also will unlikely bring us back onto budget. I think overall though, savings that we're seeing in some of our renewal programs and the funding that's available to that will combined may mean that we will end the year without needing to borrow to support our operating expenses. So long as we continue to do the things that we're doing. But there is a risk that we can't find sufficient savings and therefore borrowings may be needed to support our operating expenses due to the challenges that we face.
Would that not be unusual to be using borrowings for operational expenditure and something that we should avoid if at all possible?
That is correct. That is unusual. But I think at the moment, as I said before, that we are seeing savings in some of our renewal programs as we are responding to more active maintenance, and we can work towards an end of year position whereby we continue to find further savings. And then with the savings in our renewal program, we should be able to end the year, or we could end the year in a position where we're not having to use borrowings to support our operations. Correct.
Councillor O'Brien.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through the Chair. Thank you for your report, Thomas. May I ask, please, what's the mechanism, going back to a slide where you had regarding MHUD? And I think we're asking for 420,000. What's the mechanism there that decided that amount of money out of what we feel we've spent? Could you go into that, or perhaps Mr. Williams?
There is a set fee structure, and so there were a number of resource consents per motel that was asked for, and so it was the fee times the number.
Thank you. So can I clarify, so there's nothing to do with the actual costs of like security, etc. like that? This is purely for
processing of the resource consents, yes.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship, through the Chair. Thanks for your report, guys. Just looking ahead is a bit of risk on the horizon that I can see. I touched on it when we had a meeting last week, and now this morning some more statistics have been released that say Bay of Plenty has been identified as having 40% of household income is now going out on mortgages. And that's only going to get worse in June when the rest of them come online with their current mortgages expiring, and they're going to have to go up. So is there any risk to our rates take when these pressures come on that people just stop paying because they can't afford it?
So I'll just remind Council that we have had the collection of our third rates instalment for the year. I think that was 2 days ago. By all accounts, the collection of that seems to be comparable to previous years. Like everything, as households are squeezed, they do make choices, and I guess there is a risk in particular to some of our activities where we do have service charges in particular, that some of those services may not be requested, such as people choosing not to apply for a building consent because they're not choosing to build a house. Just remember as well, part of that question is more related to next year with regards to our proposed draft annual plan, and I think we've still got a bit of work to do with yourselves on working through that.
Thank you. Any other questions before we move into comments? Councillor Waru.
Just a quick question. Thank you, Thomas. Thank you, David. Around the, I think one of your slides there, you had contractors and but Infracore was there as a separate item. Is there a reason that is in there, given that they do works like a contractor? Just wondering.
Just internally, we do just keep track of some of our CCOs on a different line item, but they're not being treated different, no. So just the way that we were displaying that information.
Thank you. Kia ora.
If anyone has any other questions, please let me know. I did have a quick question just in terms of point 3, and just to make it quite clear, we will move point 2, and if it is the wish of the council to take that further, then there is also the option of point 3. So point 3 is currently just an option there for you. My question is, given that we're also putting the staff under a lot of time pressure to deliver the annual plan forums, and also for a final decision to strike the rate on the 1st of July, is how much additional time will we be looking at to provide an extra report for the next council meeting? I'm just mindful that we are very restricted as a new council to clean up, I suppose, overspend based on the projects and priorities of a pre-focus. Forward. Thank you. So not wanting to take up too much additional time of staff that may compromise our ability to deliver on the annual plan and strike a rate in the legislated timeframe.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, it will prove challenging for our staff. At the moment, we are obviously focusing on business, what we call business as usual. We're also responding to challenges that have fallen out of Cyclone Gabrielle. We are working and putting a lot of pressure on the organisation around a draft annual plan. So this would add significant pressure to that, yes.
Councillor O'Brien.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through the Chair. Thomas, Mr Williams, can I ask, is there a proposed, if option 3 is approved, is there a dollar set amount roughly what you're particularly looking at? Are we talking like $500,000, $1 million of savings, or you're not really sure until you look what's still available in projects? Thank you.
Yeah, so thank you, Councillor. Yes, we would look to save as much as possible, but at this point I'm not too sure how much we would find. You need to appreciate that that next step would actually look at reducing our levels of service, and so therefore it would be a noticeable change to our community. But if that is something you wish for us to do, we will strive towards that.
Thank you. And final opportunity for any questions before we move into comments or discussion.
Sorry, thank you, Your Worship. I appreciate it as the Chair. Can I ask, will Council have any opportunity for input into those savings, or will we just get a list of options and say yes or no? Thank you.
I believe, given the timeframes for the next Council meeting, which is on the 22nd of March, I believe, it would just be a yes or no. Would that be correct, Thomas? The list?
Yes, but if councillors wish to, they can suggest for us to look at, but it would be, we would be coming to you on the 22nd of March with a list for you to say yes and no to. Yes.
And I suppose that difference there is our role as governance and our staff's role as operational to go into the detail, but also bearing in mind that the timeframes there, on top of our very busy annual plan forum, would be very restrictive for the staff to prepare that in time and allow us to contribute in the same way that we are for the annual plan forum. Would probably be my only other feedback on that. There appear to be no further questions, so thank you very much to you both for your presentation today, and we now open up for any comments. Sorry, we do need a motion before we can open up for comments. There doesn't appear to be a strong desire for point 3. So, yes?
Madam Mayor, I would be prepared to move option 2 with the and option 3 on the basis of what Thomas has just mentioned in terms of the consequences of not taking the opportunity to try all strategies that we can to bring the budget back into line by financial year end, and the consequences that he has just mentioned of having to use borrowings for OPEX.
Okay, is there a second? Councillor Lee, you wish to second that? So that would be moved and second that we receive the that we take point 2 and point 3, and then we'll open up for comments on that. Do you wish to open up the speaking, or you can save your right of reply to the end?
Perhaps I'll save the right of reply to the end.
Okay. Any comments or discussion? Yes, Councillor Waru.
Just a quick comment. Challenging times. Joking, this is a lot of work, and I agree with the motion, the and option, just because I think, with all the other things going on as well, this is the only time we're going to have that opportunity to actually contribute to the kōrero. And also, besides going and approaching and talking with Thomas directly, and our CE directly around a couple of issues, but dropping our levels of service, it's a hard one, because we want to provide the best for our community. At the same time, we've got to be able to afford it. And I think if we just put that messaging out to our community as well, te katoa, just to let them know and probably paint that picture actually of the real pressures that we are under as a council. This might actually open up a bit more, open-mindedness, I suppose, around when we do present our annual plan in June or July, when we start doing that stuff. The understanding might be there around why we've come to those conclusions. So my thing is this, as well as this mahi, can we be a bit more proactive around the comms, around getting that messaging out to everybody. And koe nā noho tāku, so e tautoko ana i te mōtini nei. Kia ora.
Kia ora. Any other comments? Councillor Patterson.
Through the chair, tautoko your comments, Councillor Waru. There is a perception in the community, particularly with our roading, our paths, footpaths, our berms, our parks and reserves, that they're just not being maintained properly. And I know from the AGM at the Infracorps themselves are suffering with 18 staff short. And that was before Christmas, so goodness knows what else has happened between now and then. So yes, we need to let the people know that, hey, look, we want to have our city functioning properly. We want our community to look beautiful, but we can't do it. Just be honest and upfront and say we can't deliver these things, and that's not because we don't want to. It's just because we can't do it physically. So unless we have another strategy to try and deliver on those, we need to be very clear why we're cutting back services when we're already not delivering. So just something I would take into consideration.
Thank you, Councillor Patterson. Any further comments? Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Your Worship. The potential operating deficit of 5.6 million is obviously troubling and something that we must take seriously. So I absolutely support option 3, and I'll be most interested to see what staff come up with as recommendations or possibilities that we can consider to try and bring that in line further. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further comments? Councillor Barker.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I also do agree with what's been proposed, but I would just like to acknowledge the work that has already gone on by the team to get to the point where they have reduced cost savings to the point that they are already. And I want to reiterate how difficult times are for not just the community, but also for the council. And I'm very mindful as we make this decision what impact it's going to have on the organisation and the people who have to do the work. So I just want to acknowledge that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Barkham. Very fitting. Any other comments? Councillor O'Brien.
Thank you, Your Worship, through the Chair. It's a very sad day that we've come to this. And one of the concerns I have is, and again, I thank Thomas and his team for their report today and the stats. We face some very hard challenges ahead, and the public that we represent face some very hard challenges ahead. And one of the concerns I have is when, for example, we have I've heard today there will be options given to us, but no time for us. If I've heard once, I've heard 1,000 times that our role is supposed to be governance and to shape policy. And then the operations team conduct that policy. And I look at the further example last month for the submissions policy, which I had no idea about until it was presented on last month's agenda, which I have no problem with, it's been decided. But now we face legal action, possible legal action. We appear at sometimes to be at court more often than Judge Judy. And I wonder at times when I look at the amounts of spending going on this way, which there should have been other options that we could have looked at the submissions policy, for example, and shaped the policy to avoid us spending. So I just make that point that these are going to be very difficult times, and I hope moving forward during your tenure that we look at other opportunities to stop wasting money on, I think, on areas which needn't arise. And I'll leave it at that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor O'Brien. And just a reminder to any of the comments, we try to keep relevant to what we're currently discussing, but we do take your points on board. Thank you. I did also want to mention, just that on the submissions policy, we have received no legal action on that. So, yeah, I want to reiterate that. Any other comments? Councillor Kiriopa.
I can't help just wonder the decision for Infracore to become a yes, rather than an in-house council, a council-controlled organisation, rather than an in-house department of council. Sorry, I don't have the proper words. Seems to have resulted in, well, we're at a stage where we've got diminished maintenance of local council, of our community infrastructure, and I wonder, you know, do at any stage we really relook at that and see if a better option is not to return to the structure that we had before, where we seem to be able to cope a lot better. That's just for Karo, I'd like to for people to consider.
Yeah, and we'll certainly get to a point where we can discuss all of our CCOs and what their future priorities and direction should be. So we will get the opportunity as councillors to do that. But on that note, though, we are discussing a potential reduction of council's level of service. We did hear quite strongly from the community when they saw the results or the outcomes of what happens when we have a reduction in level of service, and unfortunately some things like mowing just weren't able to be done. That's just one of many examples, but we have these 2 points on the table now, and we will get the staff to come back with us on the options. And just bearing in mind, I do appreciate and understand the frustrations from councillors, including Councillor O'Brien's comments regarding, you know, we're in a difficult situation where we're having to deal with an overspend currently. Remember, we are at the very end of the previous financial year, which this organisation and our staff members were delivering on the direction that the previous council had set. So while we are only 4 months into our new council, with only 3 months to go until the end of this financial year, I do think that it is a good option for us to be exploring if there are any opportunities for us to reduce that. So that does appear to be all of the comments so far. I'll go back to Councillor Wang, and then we'll go back to Councillor Kai Fong. But I do want to acknowledge and thank the staff that will undertake this, because we do appreciate that it is on top of an already very busy and demanding schedule to deliver the annual plan for us in time as well. Councillor Wang.
Thank you, Worship. That was what I was just about to mention, was just to acknowledge and also thank the staff. I know that across the organisation, our CCOs already stretched very thin, as mentioned, because of a lot of the operating pressures and as well as the weather events as well. But I also just wanted to say that it is a very tough time, with the operating costs and the maintenance, and hopefully with point 3 as well, we will be able to alleviate some of the pressures currently on staff who are already stretched very thin. Hopefully alleviate some of the pressures so that they can focus on their roles as well, better focus on their roles, but just acknowledge the pressure already on staff currently with the annual plan and with many other works in the pipeline as well. But thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Kai Fong.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you to my fellow councillors for your comments as well, and I think it's really highlighted that we are facing some challenging times. We've got some unprecedented conditions in terms of things that we've had to fund, as Thomas has outlined in the report. We've got a budget that was set by previous council in different financial times as well. And I think this is a situation where we need to do everything that we can to bring the budget back into line, but without having to resort to using borrowings for operational expenditure, which I think would be a very short-term focus, which is, and as we've said, very unusual and something that we shouldn't go there. And for our community, I think that they would also understand that when times are tough, you tighten your belt. You don't keep on spending money if you don't have it. And I think that's really what we're having to do here as council. And whilst it may not be palatable for some parts of the community, I'm sure that our staff will do everything that they can to ensure that we deliver levels of service where it is a priority for the community. But it's about understanding that we've only got a short space of time to bring this budget back into line, and that we're trying to do everything that we can without having to resort to using borrowings, which have a longer term consequence where we're paying for very short term operational expenditure. So I would be happy to that we leave it with the staff and have every confidence in them to come back to us. And in fact, I think probably just get on with the job, given that we've only got a couple of months, that we don't need them to come back and provide us with a list. I think that we should have confidence in the staff that we've only got effectively 3 months to be able to implement this before the end of this financial year.
Thank you very much, Councillor Kai Fong. We do have a mover and a seconder. I'll read the motions before we put it to the vote. And when we do vote, just to ensure that our staff are recording it, what we will do now is just raise your hand so that they can guarantee that we've recorded, and we'll do that for the remainder of reports and agendas. So it's been resolved that, noting operating pressure relating to emergency housing, Plan Change 9, inflation and road and weather events, and the cost saving initiatives to date, council staff will continue to identify options to achieve budget targets within their financial delegations. And point 3, that at the next council meeting, staff will present cost-saving options through the reduction of council's level of service to the community in order to achieve budget targets. All those in favour, please raise your hand. Any? Oh, well, that's everyone. None against. That is unanimous. Thank you very much. We now move to page 24. We have the Bay of Plenty Mayoral Forum Triennial Agreement. I think if we go through that and then we'll have a short break before returning for the Rotorua District Council Representation Arrangements Bill and then going into confidential. So I'd like a mover and a seconder to receive the report, Bay of Plenty Mayoral Forum Triennial Agreement 2022 to 25 be received. Moved by Councillor Bryan, seconded by Councillor Brown. To receive the report, all those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Thank you. I'd now like to invite GC Una Hopkins to overview the report.
Sounds like it's working. Kia ora, welcome everybody. So today in front of you, keeps cutting it. Thank you. A routine piece of governance administration. Each term, all the local authorities in the Bay of Plenty region sign up to what's called a triennial agreement, which you have in front of you today for noting. And what is required of you is an endorsement that on behalf of the council, the mayor signs that triennial agreement. The agreement is in place for the entire of the term. Happy to take any questions if there are any.
Thank you very much. These agreements are fairly straightforward. There hasn't been any changes. In the report, you will also note that there are future discussions that will, or future considerations, sorry, that will come up at the forum itself, but I'll keep you updated leading into that. We have had one meeting so far as the mayors within the Bay of Plenty region. Any questions? Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Your Worship. The Strategic Partnership Forum could involve into the Joint Committee for Implementing Resource Management Reforms, but each council will need to make its own decision to agree to the Bay of Plenty being a role model region for regional spatial strategies. Could you just tell us what a role model region is and what that's about, please?
The answer to that, Councillor, is we do not know yet because we have not yet discussed it. However, it was raised at the one meeting that I have had as the Mayor with the Mayoral Forum, that it will come up for future consideration. I expressed my initial concerns to that at the time, and if that comes up on an agenda for a future meeting to be discussed, then I would certainly seek the advice of councillors on what your suggestions or feedback would be before committing to anything on behalf of Rotorua.
Thank you.
Yes, Councillor Wang.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just one quick question was how if at all the mayoral task force for jobs comes under this, or does it kind of just slip through LGNZ?
Yes, good question. That is a separate process run through LGNZ that is fully resourced through LGNZ as well. Yep. Councillor O'Brien.
Thank you, Your Worship. Could I just ask, how is iwi consulted regarding the future considerations? Thank you.
Sorry, I'm answering these all, I suppose, because as the Mayor, but if it is decided to proceed, then a consultation strategy and methodology would be then provided for councillors, for mayors to approve at that stage. So because there's no guarantee that that's how we wish to proceed, we have not. However, what I would envisage is that the mayors of each of the districts will undertake their own consultation with the mana whenua of their area, and then that will all be combined as feedback. And just for anyone, members of the public or anyone live streaming, what we are referring to is there is a future consideration for the Mayoral Forum noted that we could progress to an inclusive strategic partnership forum with iwi and central government representatives as well. So that would bring iwi and central government representatives into the discussions and the meetings too, just to be really clear.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a supplementary. So can I ask, if we decided that we wanted iwi representation but other councils did not, how does the forum decide it? Is it by a vote of majority?
Yes.
Thank you.
It will be a democratic process, of which it would be the majority. But in saying that, if it was the strong desire of Rotorua to do so, however, if that was voted down by the Mayoral Forum, there's nothing stopping us or me personally having engagement or conversations where relevant with iwi representatives, to ensure that we have that local voice as well. There appear to be no further questions. I'll get the motion put, and then if there are any comments, we can take those. I ask for a mover and a seconder for the motion, and I'll read it out, that Council notes that the Local Government Act 2002 requires not later than 1st of March after each triennial general election of members, all local authorities within each region to enter into a triennial agreement covering the period until the next election. That Council endorses the Bay of Plenty Mayoral Forum Triennial Agreement 2022 to 25 for approval and provide an electronic signature of Council's Mayor to Regional Council by 28th of February 2023. May I please have a mover and a seconder? Moved by Councillor Wang, seconded by Councillor Waru. Were there any comments on this item? Yes, Councillor Waru.
Kia ora, morena. Yeah, thank you to Councillor O'Brien. You stole my question in question time, but that's a very good point. And to also to Councillor Lee's point around the role model terminology there. I certainly hope that doesn't mean guinea pig or something like that, because you know, these are serious things, and I have every faith that you will represent us well there, Tanya. What I must insist on though is that there must be iwi representation. So I certainly hope you would advocate hard for that kaupapa, and get your fellow mayors, your colleagues, to get over the line on that. And koe na noho tāku. So e tautoko ana i tēnei kaupapa, and kia kaha.
Thank you very much. And as mentioned, if it does come up on the agenda for an item, then we'll have a wider discussion as councillors on what we wish to do. But I think moving forward, it would be my intention that we would keep further engagement either with iwi or with the community relevant to what item comes up. In the past, the mayoral triennial agreement, we haven't had any significant regional discussions or decisions, significant discussions, not necessarily decisions, that have been required where all the mayors have had to work together for something. But bearing in mind that we also have our local government reforms coming up, RMA reforms, and also, as we saw, significant community events like the cyclone. We started in a Bay of Plenty civil defence emergency that was quickly moved to national. However, those are the sorts of items that we will work together with other mayors to ensure that our region is being best represented and supported. So, did you have it? Were there any further comments? Sorry. There do appear to be none. There has been a mover and a seconder. All those in favour, please raise your hand. Against? Carried. Yeah, you can still say aye. Thank you. Okay, I suggest we take a short 10-minute break now. If we could please return at 10:40, and we will go on to discuss the Rotorua District Council Representation Arrangements Bill. Thank you. welcome back. Kia ora everyone, welcome back, and thank you for your patience as we took a few extra minutes. We are now on the Rotorua District Council Representation Arrangements Bill on page 33 of your agenda. I'd like to ask for a mover and a seconder to receive the report, and then we will get DC Gina Rangi to overview the report before taking the options of the motion and then open up for comments. So we have that moved by Councillor Barker, seconded by Councillor Patterson, to receive the report, Rotorua District Council Representation Arrangements Bill. All those in favour, please say aye. Thank you. Over to you, Gina.
Kia ora tātou. Just by very brief summary, the Local Electoral Act requires councils to review their representation arrangements every 6 years, and so at least every 6 years. And so for this council, that came up in 2022. Council went out with a model, it consulted on that, it held quite extensive hearings, and then it adopted a revised model, and I have the detail in my report. The revised model was a 118 model, which is 1 Māori seat, 1 general seat, 8 at large, but at the same time directed staff to prepare a bill, a local bill, to go to the Parliament to enable what they called the preferred model. And the preferred model was 3 from the Māori ward, 3 from the general ward, and 4 at large. Consequently, on the 29th of March 2022, almost a year ago, the Rotorua District Council Representation Arrangements Bill was introduced into the Parliament. Select committee hearings were held in early to the middle of last year. Those were very, very controversial, with a number of submissions, not only from local residents and ratepayers, but also nationally. Sorry. The Select Committee subsequently paused the hearings on request from the Council, but it still continued to seek further technical advice and legal advice. The Select Committee is required to report back to the Parliament on the 31st of May of this year. Before they report back, though, they need to reopen and finish the hearings and write their report. So it is I've got a couple of minutes again. Thank you. So it is appropriate that this council consider whether you wish to continue your support for the bill or whether you wish to withdraw your support. And based on that decision, we will communicate that to the Select Committee, and then they will decide whether to continue with the hearings and reporting to Parliament, or whether they will end the process at that point. So that's a decision. The final decision about what happens with the bill sits with the Select Committee in the Parliament, because it's entered into their domain now. But I think clearly the position that you take as the elected members of the Council will be very important to the Select Committee's decision and the Parliament's decision making. If the bill is withdrawn, then the model that we have now, which is 1 rural general ward, 6 non-rural general seats in that ward, and 3 seats in the Māori ward, plus the mayor at large, that model will continue until the next representation review. If the bill were to be enacted by Parliament, this model would continue until the next election of the local government. Okay, so your current model stays in place either way until the next election. So I just wanted to clarify that. And the next representation review must be held no later than 2028. So I'll take the rest of my report as read. Are there any questions of clarification?
Thank you very much, Gina. And as we take questions, if we could please just keep the questions relevant to what's in the report and not on what had happened previously, of which there was a substantial amount of things that happened previously. Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you for your report, Gina. You say in your report it's important to note that the Attorney General's report did not address, and you've listed 3 things, which I'm interested in. the Crown's obligation under Te Tiriti o Waitangi. Now, I have a copy of the treaty in front of me here, and Article 3 includes the phrase that Her Majesty the Queen of England extends to the natives of New Zealand her royal protection and imparts to them all the rights and privileges of British subjects. I would add no more and no less than the rights and privileges granted to British subjects. So my interpretation would be that the bill gave those on the Māori ward more voting power than British subjects, shall we call them. Could you be able to...
Point of order, Madam Chair. Relevance.
Sorry, we just have to, that is an opinion, not necessarily a question that our staff member is able to answer.
With respect, of course.
Thank you, Councillor.
I was just getting to the question, Your Worship. So my question is, you put that into the report about the Crown's obligations under Te Tiriti. Could you explain why that's important for us to consider?
Fundamentally, the reason why a bill was required is that the Local Electoral Act sets out the process for representation review and also how what councils can decide and how their electoral model is established. And one of the principles in the LEA, the Local Electoral Act, is that within each ward, the number of councillors must be roughly proportionate to the number of voters within that ward, plus or minus 10%. The LEA allows a council to exceed the plus or minus 10% rule for general wards, but not for Māori wards. So there is an issue of, in my view, discrimination, but not the one that I think was characterised a lot in some of the media. I think that the issue is that you can exceed that threshold, but only for general seats.
Were there any other questions? Councillor Lee?
Thank you, Your Worship.
Sorry, do you have a number of questions? We'll just stick on you.
There's 3 items listed on this.
Okay, we'll do questions from Councillor Lee and then anyone else.
Yes, so you say it's important that we note the Crown's obligation in respect of the Rotorua Township Agreement, particularly the local government promises made in that agreement. Could you elaborate on that, please? What words in particular are we referring to in the Rotorua Township Agreement?
So the Township Agreement does talk about, and it's very unusual and, in my experience, unique, that those early land deeds between the Crown and Mana Whenua generally just talk about land. In some instances there are talk about services, but that is very rare as well. Unusually, the Rotorua Township Agreement specifically talks about the makeup of the local board that would have powers to make certain decisions. So it talks about one, I think it's the general practitioner, the local doctor, the resident magistrate, and one person representing the Mana Whenua groups. And that's quite unusual. I'm not going to express an opinion on what that means, but one of the questions that was raised during the submission process is whether the Attorney General should have also thought about that in his opinion. Now, it may or may not have changed his opinion, but it's not something that he's specifically turned his mind to. That's important because his opinion talks about the reasons and the purpose of the bill. And one of the reasons and the purpose of the bill was to better reflect the Rotorua Township Agreement. So the fact that he didn't doesn't explicitly take that into account in his report is a matter that probably the Select Committee would have wanted further advice from him on. So those are they're interesting points to note. They're not material to the decision you're making today, but I think there was a lot of discussion about that at the time, about the Attorney General's opinion and you know, what it meant.
Thank you. Is the relevance that the Rotorua Township agreement, I don't know, applies, supersedes statutes from, let's say, the Local Electoral Act or something like that? Is that the argument?
No, so the Bill of Rights Act is not, in New Zealand it is not supreme law. So it is permissible for the Parliament to pass legislation that contravenes the Bill of Rights. And so that's the question that the Attorney General had to consider. Is there justification for this bill to contravene the Bill of Rights? And he doesn't weigh all of the reasons for the bill in reaching his opinion. So that's the question. And he does say in his opinion that it's based only on the information he had to hand. He didn't request the information from the Rotorua District Council, so that may have influenced his decision. So the reason I have noted this is because the select committee process is still in train, and there is uncertainty about how that select committee process would land. Yes, there has been an Attorney General report, but the hearing process hasn't been completed. If you were to support the bill, there would still be, all of these issues would be rehearsed and canvassed in the select committee and in the Parliament itself. And we have no control over that as the local council. That's just part of the parliamentary process.
Okay, so you would acknowledge that the Fenton Agreement was the subject of a Royal Commission of Inquiry in 1947, and that Ngāti Whakaui entered into a full and final settlement in relation to that?
Councillor Lee, sorry, I think you're swaying a bit outside of what's relevant to the report, and just a reminder, questions should be coming through the chair, not directly to staff. Do you have any further questions? And bear in mind that the purpose of questions and then our decision today will be on the future focus of this bill, on whether we withdraw our support or confirm the support.
No further questions, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor Lee. Any other questions? Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Your Worship. Gina, just a question regarding the very last paragraph of your report. It seems that, I'll just read that out, it is not recommended that the next representation review be brought forward. Instead, time should be allowed so that the community and council can observe and consider how effective the existing model is. So is that last paragraph actually what you're recommending?
The recommendation is set out in the second part, but I am mindful that people would be wondering, well, what does that mean for us now? If the bill is removed, does that affect our current model? And what I'm saying is, it doesn't affect this council. You will continue until the next election, and I'm not recommending that. Because this bill might be withdrawn, I'm not recommending that, therefore you should then start another process for a number of reasons, including the fact that you have a new model. We haven't had wards in this district for a long time, so I think it would be helpful to see how well that works. This is also the first time in a long time that we've had a rural ward, as well as the Māori wards, so I don't think you should read anything further into the recommendation other than that. I think it would be worth just allowing time for the community and the council to evaluate what the current model is and whether in the future you might want to make changes, but it's probably too early to make that decision at this point.
Thank you.
And sorry, just to further on that, it is within Gina's report as well, the usual timeframes for a representation review, which might not be widely known for the community. Those usually occur every 6 years. We are required to do that within 6 years. So it would be unusually premature to discuss it within this term of council. Yes. I'll just see if there's any other councillors, then we'll come back to you. Councillor Waru.
Tēnā koe te tiamana, tēnā koe Gina. Kai te pai tō mare mare. Okay. No, I think it'd be good to get some context around, how we came to be in the model that we're in now. And so the representation, what the representation review called it. So could you just sort of backtrack it a bit and explain that a bit more so we all sort of on the same page, please?
So I was appointed a technical advisor to the Select Committee, so questions relating to the Select Committee process I can deal with, but the representation review itself is the responsibility of Una and her team, so I'll probably hand it to Una to talk to that.
Oh, we can go both, so.
This, perhaps if I can help, it is detailed within the report. There is a lot of history that's gone into this ever since the first decision which sparked this off, which was whether we introduced Māori wards, which happened in 2021. So if I could perhaps quickly summarise for you, after the introduction of Māori wards, that then sparked the requirement for a representation review to look at, well, what will the remaining seats look like? Rotorua for some time had 10 at-large councillors, so we were not used to the ward system. Through that process, as mentioned this morning, there were a number of different models that were suggested, starting with the 118, and then a desire to not have to restrict people's voting, which was an unintended consequence of introducing wards, where based on if you're on the general ward or the Māori ward, restricted your vote to only those seats. And then when at the same time, which is why it was confusing, the local government commission was also undertaking an independent review of our representation as well, of which they introduced, based on submissions from the community, the rural ward as well. So that then superseded our model that was sitting in Parliament, of which at that time Parliament said, what would you like, Select Committee said, what would you like to do? And it was decided that the best way forward would be to pause it. So the Mayor at the time wrote to them, based on a vote of council, pause that bill. We've got a model from the Local Government Commission. We will have to take that into the election. I think it's important to note that underlying all of this was extremely unprecedented time pressures, of which we had a very short time frame to discuss, and almost no time, almost no time compared to what we usually would for consultation with the community on their representation review as well. So it was quite a difficult time, which is why we now have the opportunity as a new council to make the decision on whether we wish to continue with that bill that is currently in council or not. So, quick summary of the last
kia ora,
2 years.
I appreciate that. Reason for my question is this, those who are watching and everything too, so our community don't always go through our agendas and things like that, so it's good to hear and just get those memories flowing again around how we got to this point. I was actually a director from LGNZ, from the commission. So, Kuira, that's how we are where we are. Gina, just to follow up on that one, you talked about the Select Committee kaupapa. Could you explain a bit more about that too, please?
So when a bill, legislate a bill, which is what you call an act of Parliament before it's enacted and made into law. A bill is drafted by an office called the Parliamentary Council. They draft it, that's their specialist expertise. It is then has its first reading in Parliament. Because this is a local bill, a member of Parliament has to agree to sponsor the bill on behalf of council. There are only a few organisations that are allowed to introduce a local bill. Councils are one of those. In this case, Tamati Coffey, who's a list MP for Labour but is locally resident, agreed to be the sponsor for the bill. And it had its first reading in Parliament. It then gets sent to a select committee. So the select committee, in this case, was the Māori Affairs Select Committee. It's made up of 8 members, and I've happened to write their names down. Tamati Coffey, who is the chair, Arena Williams, Paul Eagle, Soraya Peke Mason, Harete Hipango, Tamapōtaka, who is replacing another National MP, I can't recall who it was, Te Anau Tui Ono and Rawiri Waititi. So you've got broad representation of all the parties that sit on that select committee. They then have a hearing and call for submissions, and they also take technical advice from, in this case, the Department of Internal Affairs, the Attorney General, the Ministry of Justice and Rotorua Lakes Council. They then produce a report recommending changes to the bill or not, and that then has a second reading and then a third reading in Parliament. The bill has to pass a vote at each stage. After that, it is passed by the Parliament. It then is signed by the Governor-General and becomes law. In this case, on our current timeframes, if the bill were to continue, it would have its next reading in, I think, May, 31 May, the Select Committee reports back, and it would be enacted probably before the end of the year. You have no control, though, over the timeframes for when Parliament carries out its business. Ministers don't even control when things are, how quickly things pass through. That is one of just the procedural things of Parliament, but probably it would be enacted before the next election. That's a question for the House, and nobody outside of Parliament and lots of people inside Parliament don't get to control those timeframes.
And just supplementary to that, what would the impact be if we decided to go through with it?
If you decided to confirm your support for the bill, the Select Committee would have to reopen hearings and take all the technical advice that they need to, and then provide a report by the 31st of May to Parliament. There could be changes. Your consent would not be sought for any of those changes, or your views would be requested, but ultimately it's for Parliament to decide what the legislation looks like. So now that it's in the domain of Parliament, Parliament is supreme and they control their process.
So the bill proceeding has no impact on what we do as of now?
Not for this triennium. Yeah.
Kia ora. Thank you.
Thank you. Just to further clarify that point, please, Gina. So if it was to proceed, am I correct in what you've mentioned, that the council will then lose an opportunity to have a say in what the final model will be, that they will then take the feedback and give us back a model which would not only lose our decision-making ability, but our ability to take on feedback from our community at that time?
I'm sure that the views of the council would be requested, but the decision-making power sits with the Parliament as a whole.
Thank you. Councillor Brown, and sorry, Councillor, I do have you noted, but we'll get through any other councillors for questions first.
Thank you, Madam Chair. If it went through and the Select Committee gave us what they gave us, how long would that be put in place, and would it be reviewable at some point?
That is one of the technical questions that the Select Committee is looking through. So on the face of it, it would be for 2 years, 2 election cycles. The question is, what would happen at the end? Would we go back into representation review processes? So that is one of the technical questions that the Select Committee is seeking further advice on. There's no sort of options that have been presented or made public at this stage. So where that would land, we don't know. But as currently drafted, it's for 2 election cycles.
Councillor O'Brien.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through the Chair. Thank you, Gina, for your excellent report. Can I ask you, so how do we as Council, as Rotorua Lakes Council, how do we, given the concerns of the Attorney-General, how do we actually, what are our arguments regarding his concerns? Thank you. And the second part of that will also be, if you don't mind, Your Worship, obviously there can still be amendments to the bills presented by the Select Committee or individual MPs. Thank you.
Yes, so I'll deal with the second question first. Yes, amendments can happen right through the parliamentary process until we get to the final vote. And at each stage, any amendment needs to have the support of the majority of the House. Going back to the first question, which was the consent of the Attorney General. I think probably our request would be that the Attorney General consider the anomaly that general wards can exceed the plus or minus 10% rule, but Māori wards can't. I would be really interested to see what his independent advice would be on that. I wouldn't express an opinion myself about what he should say, but I think that's a really interesting question that he hasn't addressed in his opinion, and it would be very helpful for that to come out. Yeah.
Thank you. Were there any further questions? Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Your Worship. Gina, I just refer you to the second to last paragraph of your report. You refer to the Canterbury Regional Council Ngāi Tahu Representation Act, and you refer to that in relation to what the next representation arrangements bill could look like for Rotorua. Could you elaborate on that for us, please?
Slightly ahead of the Rotorua District Council Representation Arrangements Bill. So after we had put the bill into the House, but before it completed its select committee process, the Canterbury Regional Council had their own local bill finalised. It had taken a little bit of time for them to get it finalised and approved by the House. But that was enacted on the 8th of August. So I think it is relevant in the sense that it's a different model again. It's occurred after we had done our representation review. There may be some useful things to consider for Te Aroha, the community and the council to consider about a different mechanism again. And so essentially what happened was, as you all may all recall, after I'm not sure how long ago it was, but Environment Canterbury for a while had commissioners, and as part of that arrangement they had Ngāi Tahu people directly appointed to their council. And when the ordinary council process was reintroduced, the new council noted that there was an absence of a Ngāi Tahu voice at their table, and that's when the council itself said, well, we actually would like, rather than having Māori wards, we would prefer to have Ngāi Tahu direct appointments to our committees. And so they promoted not to committees, to the council itself. So they promoted a bill which passed, and the arrangement now for Canterbury Regional Council is that they have their council, and then they also have 2 seats at the council table appointed directly by Te Runanga o Ngāi Tahu, and that's decision-making full powers. So when they do their representation review, they review everything else except for those 2 seats. So it is an unusual model. Interestingly, although at this time they have not provided for a Māori ward as part of their representation, the bill allows them to have Māori wards in the future if they decide to do that through a representation review. So I think it's another interesting model, and is the evolution of New Zealand's kind of thinking about how we respond to the role of mana whenua within local government.
So if we was to apply that to what that might look like for Rotorua at the next representation arrangements bill, is it conceivable that we could have a Māori ward with 3 seats and 2 seats in addition to that, potentially appointed by, let's say, Te Tātou o Te Arawa?
Sorry, Councillor Lee, that would be a political decision for the elected members to make. So I would not like to ask our staff member to provide an opinion on a political decision just yet.
My question wasn't a political one, it was a technical one, asking whether that would be possible or that would be conceivable if we were to follow the model of the Canterbury Regional Council. is that a conceivable model for Rotorua? Whether it's taken up politically is a whole different matter, but that's not the question I'm raising.
So yes, it is possible, but that would be through a decision and direction of councillors in the council at the time.
As part of a representation arrangement review. Thank you.
Yeah. There appear to be no further questions. Any final questions? No. Well, thank you very much for the questions. Thank you for your presentation, Gina. As I will be the one as Mayor writing to the Select Committee, I would like to move that the Council write to the Māori Affairs Select Committee to advise the Council withdraws its support for the bill, and that will be seconded by Councillor Lee. Yep. So we have a mover and a seconder to withdraw the support for the bill. Are there any comments or discussion points for this? Yes, Councillor Kiriopa.
I wasn't involved in any of the discussions at the time around that, but after speaking with a number of people who did, it's my understanding that what went forward to the Select Committee wasn't something that was supported by Te Aroha at the time. So I'm happy for it to be withdrawn. I'd just like to say that enough time prior to 2028 is taken to ensure proper engagement with iwi around any decision making moving forward. Mahi.
Thank you. Councillor Lee, did you have your hand up?
Sure. Thank you, Your Worship. To me, this the most troubling aspect of this bill is the assault, I would call it, I suppose, on democracy. And I would say to those who supported this bill and this arrangement that democracy is tapu. When you're talking about democracy, we're walking on sacred ground. We're talking about 2 world wars were fought on this last century. Tens of millions of people were killed in the name of democracy. And democracy is about people having, it's about people rule. That's literally what the word democracy means, the rule of the people. And the people get an opportunity to decide who their rulers will be at free and democratic and fair elections. You can't have elections that are essentially a sham. We can't have a situation, I think, where Councillor Kariopa's vote is worth 2.5 of my votes, for example. I think that's just plainly,
Sorry, Councillor Lee,
plainly wrong.
A sham is probably not the correct term to use. That's the process for going through the bill to see if it would become legal. But please carry on.
Well, it's certainly the word I would choose, because you got to explain the difference as to how 56,000 people in the general roll would have the same voting power as 20,000 people on the Māori roll, and there's a serious discrepancy there, and that right there explains why those two bodies of people should not, in a free and democratic society, have the same amount of voting power. So, you know, my parents were teenagers in World War II. They watched the Nazi planes flying over, dropping bombs. My grandfather fought in World War I. These are his medals here. And I think this is really all about democracy. And so I'll certainly be voting to remove the bill from Parliament. And I'd like to acknowledge also the community who put in a big effort to oppose this bill, who protested against it, who funded the judicial review to the tune of more than $40,000. Hats off, and credit where credit is due to Reynold McPherson and the RDRR who made that possible. democracy is really important to the community, and I'll certainly be supporting the removal of the bill for that reason.
Thank you, Councillor Lee. Any further comments? Yes, Councillor O'Brien.
Thank you, Your Worship, and I'd just again like to acknowledge Mrs Lange's report and also her very helpful answers during our question period. In regards the end part of her report, and I'd like to keep this back on the report if we can, I'd just like to say that as far as I'm concerned, I'm very happy at any stage that given some of the misinformation and also the hurt caused by the decision to go with this bill last year, and some of it very personal, directed at members on both sides of the argument, I don't believe that there's ever too early to start consultation on the process. I personally don't believe in the ward system at all, rural or Māori wards, and would like to see a return back to 10. That's my personal opinion. Otherwise, either by, if that was to be overturned by a referendum. So I would actually urge this council, maybe not this year, but next year or the year after, to very strongly consider about long-term consultation. I think part of the reason where we're at today is because of the very rushed nature. Where at one stage we had like 3 models floating around, and I would urge this council under your leadership as soon as possible, in my opinion, to start looking at consultation. In my opinion, it can't come early enough. Thank you very much, and I'll be voting in support to withdraw the motion.
Thank you, Councillor O'Brien. Any further comments? Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Your Worship, through the Chair. I presented twice, once to this council in these chambers. I think I was the last person on the last day of submissions, and again to the Parliamentary Select Committee. So my point of view at that time hasn't changed, that this is all about people. You know, that what we do here affects the lives of people and the people before us. So it's not just who we are today, and it's not just the people down the track, but also we've got to remember the people who came before us. What they stood for was democracy, as Councillor Lee rightly pointed out, the power of one man or one woman, one vote. And so I will be supporting this step in the right direction, I would say. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Patterson. Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Your Worship. I think I support the bill. I would just like to hear from Councillor Wateru if he feels inclined to give his opinion.
Shortly? Okay. Any other comments? Councillor Barker.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you to Gina for her report and answering of the questions. I would like to agree with my fellow councillors about the fact that with the consultation that led up to this particular bill was sadly lacking, and as you've mentioned, it's really important that the community has a chance to have its say, and whether that is a retention of the wards or not. I would just like to say that I think that we should also give the chance for the ward system to be watched and observed and to see how it works. We have to, in this model that we have now, given us by the Electoral Commission, a proportionate representation, and we have, for the first time, a rural voice sitting around the table that is actually dedicated, as well as 3 Māori seats. So it would be really worthwhile giving us the time to see how this model works, and I would be supporting the withdrawing of the bill. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Barker. Councillor Waru.
Kia ora tātou katoa, tēnā koe te marukura. Well, kia tātou mea, hua tūpato tātou, ia tātou e kororara mo te tapu. Tapu is a very different meaning to me. Democracy, nā te tangata, man-made. Tapu, nā te atua. Nā ngā tua rāne. That's how my whakaro about it, how we were brought up. You know, I believe my colleague, Councillor Lee, mentioned the rule of the people. You know, we interpret it, well, I interpret it certainly as the rule of the majority. That's very different in my book. And when you talk about democracy and being fair, you know, there was for years, many years, it's only recently been abolished, the 5% rule, where if councils wanted a Māori ward, we would only take 5% of the community to vote against it, and that would be overturned instantly. That didn't apply to General Ward or any other ward. Is that fair democracy? I don't think so, in my own opinion. My tupuna also went to war. All of the wars, mo Aotearoa. And in the Māori battalion, te rua te kaumāwaru, and they paid the price, big time, more than any other, if I can say that. Not that anybody else is worth more than other, but I'm saying, mo te ao Māori tonu, we paid the major price, everybody knows that. And look where we are today. We have a beautiful country, beautiful people. Yet when our people came home, their lands were taken, farmed out, given to other soldiers. These are histories and things that we need to take into account when we talk about these types of whakaaro. And also, you know, I look at this bill and I say to myself, well, all the mahi's been done. Is there any harm of letting it, you know, go through and follow its course, see where it gets to? It might get to select committee and it might end there. The parliamentary process is the parliamentary process. We have the ability to amend if we want to, or by negotiation. I didn't quite get that, but that could be, that is an option to my understanding. Around the couple of points that Gina Rangi made around the Fenton Agreement, well, the Rotorua Township Agreement, and also it came out in 1947, it was a full and final. That is not, you have to understand the context in which that happened to understand fully why Ngāti Whakaue in particular hold strong to that. Things were not done, things were not bargained, both sides of the bargain were not upheld. Therefore, way back in that time, koira te wā I whati ai te kaupapa. So we go back right to the first breaking point, I suppose, of those negotiations in those times. And yet, still today, we hear Te Arawa is here, Ngāti Whakaue is here, contributing heaps, huge amounts of kaupapa to our community. For everyone, mo te pae ngāti o te katoa, I believe the kōrero was in the Fenton Agreement by Judge Fenton, for the betterment of all people. And we still remain on that kaupapa, graciously. So I'm going to go a bit against the grain. I know the numbers are there. However, I just wanted to say my piece and say, well, actually, I don't agree with that. I would rather go the other way and see the course, see it run its course, I suppose. However, koina noho o ku whakaaro, and I know I'm supported also by Councillor Maxwell, who unfortunately is not here today. But, you know, the decision will be the decision, and kei te pai ki Aotearoa, that's democracy. Kia ora.
Kia ora, ngā mihi nui tō whakaaro rangatira. Thank you for those wise words. And also, just a reminder as well, we will get the opportunity through a future representation review to make sure that it is done right in future. So we're certainly taking on board the feedback as well to give our community plenty of time to decide what is best for them. Were there any other comments? Look, there do appear to be none. I think this has been very well debated. I appreciate that the councillors have come to the table with an open mind. I appreciate the questions and the diverse range of comments that come about from it. So we do have a mover and a seconder. I would like to put the motion to the vote that Council write to the Māori Affairs Select Committee to advise that the Council withdraw its support for the bill. All those in favour, please raise your hand. All those against? Thank you. Would you like it? Would you like that recorded, Councillor Waru? Yes, please. Okay. And that is carried. So what will happen from here is I will write to the Māori Affairs Select Committee to advise them, and I will keep councillors informed of any correspondence that comes back to confirm that. And that is that done and dusted. So The bill is. Yeah. So we now have a resolution to go into public excluded. I just want to advise that we will be discussing two items for consideration. Number one is an extension of contract 2103 Linton Park Detention Park upgrade, and second item, award of contract 23003 water main upgrade, State Highway 5, Rotorua Hancock Road Dairy Factory. I do also want to note that the minutes for these will be released very shortly after the discussion. The minutes for the first item will be released following this meeting on the 22nd February, and the minutes for the second item will be released as soon as successful tenderers have been advised. The reasons for going into confidential are to enable commercial or industrial negotiations, and also for commercial sensitivity. Would you like to move that, Councillor Waru? Yeah, moved by Councillor Waru, seconded by Councillor Brown. We put that to the vote that Council move into public excluded session. All those in favour, please.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Excuse me, sorry to interrupt. Through you, Madam Chair. This has always been one of the things that's bothered me about the way we operate, that we keep moving into confidential. I understand the commercial sensitivity, etc. I was just thinking about it the other day. Could we not have some sort of report before the council meeting that highlights to us the financial nature of what we're about to discuss, and then that is not discussed at the council meeting because we already know that? So then we can hear, and the public can hear, the other parts of what we're about to discuss that don't have any bearing on finances, so that they can be involved in these. Is there another way of doing this? That's all. Thank you.
Thank you for raising it, Councillor Patterson. We have explored those options in the past. The most recent that I can remember was updates on the Tarawera sewage scheme, where the presentation by staff was able to be conducted in the public session before we then moved into confidential. Given the nature, and so happy to take that on board for future, it would be appropriate based on what topic we are discussing, due to the nature of the contract, extension of contract upgrade, and also the award of a contract. Within those do actually list people's or companies' names, of which the commercial sensitivity is also there. So as mentioned though, in this case, the minutes of it will be released immediately after this meeting, or immediately after the successful tenderers have been notified. And bear in mind, I think we need to, the purpose of commercial sensitivity is to ensure that, as an example, the tenderers don't know what the other tender is in the amount that they have put in, which helps to protect us, to make sure that the council is getting the best deal possible. Yeah. But certainly take your point on board. Thank you, Councillor Patterson. We do have mover and seconder, so all those in favour that council move into public excluded session, please raise your hand. All aye. Any against? Carried. Thank you. We'll just give a few minutes for our public to vacate and our live stream to be turned off. Thank you very much to the public.